Good morning, students. I am Shubha Hiremat, Assistant Professor of English, Government First Grade College, Dharwad. In the previous session, we had discussed the summary of story Sparrows, the major themes, and the character of Rahim Khan. In this session, let us try to analyze the symbolic aspects in the story Sparrows and also the narrative techniques used by the author to make this story more effective. Symbolism. In literature, whether it is poem, story, novel or drama, we find many symbolic aspects. There are many images, figurative language used by the author so that the story or the characters become more effective and memorable. In this way, symbolism is one of the important trait in any kind of art or literature. In this story too, the notable writer who was novelist, journalist, story writer, Abbas genuinely reflect the feelings of people. Sparrows is a beautiful and touching story of Rahim Khan. We have already discussed the character of Rahim Khan. He is like any other ordinary man. On first impression, he seemed cruel, but there was a kind heart. Once he was a good man, but circumstances had made him cruel and people disliked him. But at the end of the story, there was transformation in the behavior of Rahim Khan. The story, in which apparent meaning of characters, events and setting is used to symbolize a deeper meaning. The name of characters like Rahim Khan, Rahim itself means mercy, and the setting of the story, that is a village or the hut of Rahim Khan, everything here we can take them as a symbol which represent something deep meaning in the story. So let us list out these symbols one by one and what is the deeper meaning represented by them. They are nicely blended with the theme. The first symbolic aspect is sunset. Students, when we begin reading the story, in the first paragraph itself, the story begins with sun. The sun was setting behind the mango grove which fringed the western extremity of the village when Rahim Khan returned from the fields. So we already know that Rahim Khan was a farmer, and the timing when the story began was set, it was sunset, and he was returning from the fields, broad and strong despite his 50-odd years, with the pluff on his shoulders and driving his 2 oxen. He walked through the main street of the village with a haughty and unfriendly air. So here we find the sunset symbolize grim and death, just as sunrise symbolizes hope and life. Sunset means end or decay. that the beginning itself was like something representing decay in the character of Rahim Khan. He was already 50 years old and he used to work hard in field. He had oxen and he was returning to the village. This is the first symbol in the story. Second symbol is Fluff and Circus. So he was carrying Fluff on his shoulder. Always we find, especially in India, farmers always use Fluff. Nowadays there are many modern techniques, machines which are used in the field, agriculture land, but still majority of farmers, they practice conventional farming, and Fluff is symbolic of hard work and turmoil in the field. Here Rahim Khan, being a farmer, he too was carrying Fluff on his shoulders. It was like Fluff here symbolized burden of his unfulfilled dreams. Fluff, the symbolic meaning of Fluff is a kind of burden. Rahim Khan was burdened with his unfulfilled dreams and hatred of people he carried all through his life. In society, he had hatred against customs, against tradition, but still he had to survive, he had to live in the same society. That is why it was a kind of burden for him. And it also symbolized his unfulfilled dreams. We already know that Rahim Khan had two ambitions when he was young. One is to join circus and the one is to marry a girl named Radha. Both his ambitions were crushed by his parents and he made tradition and society responsible for that. We can thus understand here Fluff as a symbol of burden of his unfulfilled dreams. Later he married, he had children, and he also followed the same occupation of his parents, that is farming. Another symbol in the story is circus. He wanted to join circus. When we were children, we used to visit circus. We used to enjoy the stunts or whatever, even joker. So it symbolizes happiness and life. He wanted to join circus, a touring company. So all that happiness, all that liveliness remained as a dream. His wishes were suppressed. Circus was too lowly for them. His parents thought that he must follow farming or agriculture instead of circus. The people who work in circus were treated as low. So this is again symbolic aspect. Next important symbol in the story is hut. Rahim Khan's hut that stood grand and aloof at a distance from the neighboring cluster of homes. So his hut was distant and aloof. It was a single hut away from other colony or other huts in the village. So it was a gloomy place. There was no light. Here hut is symbolical of his alienation from the society. He was alienated from the neighbors, villagers, and also his loneliness. The villagers gather in Chopal to gossip and to smoke, but he never joins them. He had no friends, and because of his violent nature, his own sons and wife had left him. Now, like Hut, he became lonely and alienated from the society. In that way, Hut is a symbol, we can take it as a symbol which was stood gaunt and aloof at a distance, same like Rahim Khan. It symbolizes a grave where he was found dead at the end of the story, or a deserted place. Next symbol is sheep. When his dreams were unfulfilled, his ambitions were crushed by his parents, he was helpless and he married a girl, and since then he lived there were 30 years of marriage, but there was no love or caring for the family. Here his wife became victim of domestic violence. She was symbol of oppression. That is why in the story the narrator very beautifully expressed this, like wife symbolized only streak of light he had left in his life, and after whose departure hut was dark and deserted. His wife represented patriarchal society and domestic violence. He used to beat her like how a butcher treats sheep. Necessarily a piece of furniture. She was nothing for him, and he can only exercise his authority on her as a husband. On the day of Nikah, Rahim Khan mechanically nodded. The word mechanically symbolized he was devoid of any feelings. His shattered dreams killed the cheerful boy inside him and crushed his soul. On the first day of marriage, his wife waited for him as a sheep waits the butcher. Sheep is the symbol of oppression and women who suffer domestic violence. Not 1 or 2 years, 30 years of marriage, his wife became tool upon whom he could venture his frustrations against his parents and society. Without her fault, she remained victim of such kind of brutality. Finally, she too left him, and her escape symbolized the freedom, just as in Doll's House, Nora decides to leave her husband to be free. So that is a kind of marriage which is depicted in the story. This is against law today. We must understand that women or wife is not like a tool or furniture. She has equal rights, and men should not treat women as inferior or as a thing on which they can show their anger or frustration. The tolerance on the part of women make their will stronger. That is why we must understand and we must teach boys to give respect to women. Though they are wife or sister or daughter, still they too have right to live dignified. But we find many cases in society where educated people treat their own wife like a tool, like Rahim Khan, how he treated his wife. So these are some social evils or practices which we should not encourage. Another symbol is open window. The hut which was earlier distant and aloof, which was gloomy, with the entry of sparrows, there is warmth and light. The windows are now open. There is the rays of sun streaming through the open window. So this scene symbolizes beginning of new life for him. Open window symbolizes he welcomed new life with new arms, new hope. When there was no one in the hut, he woke up, he had no food and he wanted to clean the cobweb. Here cobwebs symbolize bitter memories he had of his past that veiled his heart and the hatred. So when he decided to cleaning cobwebs, it is like he had opened for the new light to come inside the hut. The very important symbol of the story is Sparrow. Though Rahim Khan is the protagonist of the story is titled as Sparrows because they played crucial role in transforming his behavior. Here the bird sparrow keeps on appearing in literature, and there is always a deeper meaning of this bird. It represents vigilance, joy, creativity, and also wisdom. Birds symbolize good luck also. As in the case of Rahim Khan, they brought hope and filled his last days with contentment. There is a kind of motivation for Rahim Khan to show kindness and love. He understood the meaning of family, the meaning of love and affection for one another through the sparrow and the nest. They were his only companions when he died. He loved them to such extent that he named the baby sparrows after his own sons, Nuru and Bundu. And his only concern when he was dying was that who will feed them after his death. Like that, sparrows symbolize a kind of joy and good luck in the case of Rahim Khan. If sparrow enters your life, it might be remind you that there may be room for cooperation in your life. So all these small creatures, not only sparrow, many more aspects in nature. It may be sunrise, it may be stars, it may be birds or even grass. They can teach us something more valuable than the books or teacher. In that way, sparrows taught him the lesson of love and care and to value family. That is why the story became famous, or the story is very interesting to read. It is a kind of motivational because of the bird sparrow. Narrative technique. Any writer become specific, or they have their own kind of narrative technique so that people identify them through those narrative techniques. To make the work of art effective and more beautiful, every author need to cultivate their own narrative technique. This story too is significant from the point of narrative technique that K. Abbas uses. He used fine literary elements of irony, contrast, symbolism through the plain narrative and skill of characterization. The story is too simple to read. Its simplicity itself is distinct mark, and the characterization, the way characters were portrayed, that too make this story interesting. It will be a common sense and general comment to say that story has a stark realism, rural fatalism, and psychological significance. There are many aspects, many techniques used by K. Abbas to make this story memorable. He named the characters carefully, the setting or symbolic aspects, irony, all these are handled very carefully so that we can critically appreciate the story. To conclude this session, Sparrows in no way intends to tell readers that they have the liberty to treat others miserably because they have been through the same. The story is about Rahim Khan, who was initially hard-hearted, but he had his own reasons for that. But it doesn't mean that if somebody crushed your ambition or somebody responsible for the failure, we should not thrust that anger or frustration on others. Here he showed his anger, frustration on his wife, children, and even cattle. It is not the right way. His point is to tell readers that there is kindness in every soul. Through the story, there is a message that however cruel a man is, still there is kindness, there is love. On the surface, we cannot find it, but it is buried deep. As an individual, we need to find light in ourselves and be as less a judge as possible. We should not judge person on their appearance, on the first impression. We may be wrong. Appearance is different, reality is different. We should try to guide ourselves instead judging others. And if possible, we must treat everyone equally and we must live in harmony. That is about the story Sparrows. With this, I will conclude my essay, my lecture on the story Sparrows by K. Abbas. Thank you.